coming up, and we are going to be looking at money, really looking at money and earning. We're not going to shy away from it. We are going to look at it square in the face. We're going to have a vision workshop in the afternoon, so after lunch, those of you who do not want to work on vision boards, we only ask that you don't use the tables at the back. Some people just prefer to write, probably doing some of the things that Andrew said. During the Visions workshop, there will be a series of speakers, so it'll be like a panel. You'll have lots of opportunities to ask questions. After that, there's going to be another one which is really looking at all the issues and stuff we have around money and how that really affects us. Our wonderful Where's Your Money person, otherwise known as the Seventh Tradition Keeper, is also going to be giving us a talk on, well, I don't know if it's 7, I don't know how many financial habits it is, that must underpin your recovery. So we're not going to shy away from the vision. We're not talking about being vision drunk. Tomorrow, we're also going to look at things like, does God want me to be rich? Will I become a bad person? Is money spiritual? What does earning in the marketplace mean? Visible in the marketplace mean? So all I would invite you to do, although certain areas may be a little bit emotionally difficult this weekend, is stay with the process, and then we will get to that place of clarity so that when you leave here you have a blueprint. But speaking of that blueprint, we're also going to be looking at UA How tomorrow. Some of you might have heard of it, some of you may wonder what is that, and it's a way to really monitor and measure the action steps that you need to take or could take arising out of your vision. That's going to be really, really exciting, very challenging, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. So please enjoy this weekend, and if you need anything, you're our guests of the World Service Committee, so whatever you need, we do try our best to provide it for you. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Great. I can't add anything to that. That's great. Okay. Thanks, Bella. Okay, I'd like to ask Ed to come on up now to share for 45 minutes. We're a little bit behind schedule, but you know what? Do what you feel, and then if you want to leave time for questions afterwards. This is the beginning of a Vision of Recovery series of speakers that will not shy away from talking about financial recovery. So let's give a warm welcome of applause to Ed.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for being willing to listen to me. But what I really want to do is pray for guidance in trying to present this vision. So I'd like to offer the following. There's a power, the presence, and a consciousness that is within all, that has created everything. It created our doubts. It created our fears. It created our hearts. It created our glory. And now, let's rejoice in that. Let's open ourselves to the understanding that is already within us, that I personally, Ed, and I'd like to say my last name, but I'm not supposed to, know that it's within my heart to give you. Amen. So what I'd like to start with is pointing out that recovery means something that you had lost, and now you're getting it back. And I was reminded of this very graphically last night because I went on a little ride with Mike, well, we went to the beach yesterday, and it turned out that we missed dinner, and we didn't, so we had to go off. And I wound up discovering that my room key was missing. Oops. So I had to go recover my room key. Now, actually, that was a really interesting experience. I mean, it seems kind of mundane. But, I'm into this God consciousness stuff. So I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't be able to find it. But I insisted that I would not worry, that I would know that it was there, and that I would find it. And sure enough, well, more precisely, Mike found it for me. But that's the way it is. I understand that there is something, some knowledge, some truth that can come out and reveal itself, all right, in this admittedly rather trivial way. But it's still there. And the thing is that every spiritual tradition teaches that within us is a profound, profound truth. It's said that all of us have the Christ consciousness, this being a Christian center, so I suppose I should say it that way. You know, it's a word, but there is something magnificent within all of us that is waiting to be recovered, and that is a vision of recovery. Now, the reason I'm coming here now is because what I want to share with you is what I don't want to do is I want to say, well, guess what, folks? I've doubled my income. Okay. Well, guess what? I haven't doubled my income. I've probably increased my income by a factor of 5 since this program started. But that's not the point. The point is, what about you? What about your recovery? What about the universal recovery? And that's what I really care about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, oddly enough, my favorite opera. Because my favorite opera is, in a certain sense, a recovery story. And that opera is the Magic Flute. And it's a truly bizarre story. Because anybody who knows it knows that you think it's going to be about something. It's about this guy. You think it's going to be about this guy, Tamino, bringing along his buddy Papageno, and they're going to rescue the girl. Well, that's the first act. And there's all this sort of wonderful Sturm und Drang about that. And then all of a sudden, we discover that it's about something else. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you have this wonderfully heroic figure. His name is Tamino. But the genius of that opera is the buddy. The buddy's name is Papageno. And he's a bird catcher. You know, he sort of flies around with feathers. And the thing is that every time he's presented with the opportunity to be heroic, he chickens out. And I can't help but thinking, this is a program of Papagenos. We're not the glorious heroes, you know. And I was thinking, well, okay, vision of recovery. Well, you know, I sort of felt like to some degree I was sort of set up to give this story about myself as a glorious hero. But you know what? I'm not. And there is only one glorious hero. And at the end of the opera, we find out who it is. And it's neither Papageno nor Tamino, but the guy who we think in the beginning is the bad guy, the so-called evil sorcerer Sarastro, who turns out to be a spiritual teacher of the highest order. And actually, ultimately, it's not even him. He is a manifestation of the truth as it is. And he is what he is, and he just lets himself be. And that's ultimately that's the hero in all of us. Now, at the same time, there's this wonderful humanity about the guy who's the loser. And the genius of the opera is to realize the true humanity of this guy who, by the way, goes along in this wonderful adventure just because he wants a wife. And he just wants somebody to cuddle with, you know? No great glory, no nothing. And again, that's us, or at least that's me. Now, my plan for this talk actually was that I would present for about 15 minutes a sort of a kind of a universal sense of recovery. And this is that part of this. But what's moving on is a little bit about how I, Ed, experienced that recovery. But the thing that I wanted to say about my experience with this program is that there is a universal sense, an unconditional sense of hope. And that to me is the most powerful thing about this program, and that to me is the most powerful thing about recovery, about again, I made my decision that I was going to be absolutely sure that I was going to find my keys. And I made a decision that I was going to be absolutely sure that I was going to find my recovery. And I'm still doing that. Along the way, though, I found out something very important. I found out two things, actually. The first is that there is this symptom in this program called a compulsive need to prove. And I am a living embodiment of the compulsive need to prove. And I spent much of my life establishing myself in the zone of compulsively proving. And I have a bunch of degrees, and I have this, that, and the other thing, and I wanted very badly to continue compulsively proving, even though, frankly, it made me miserable. But, you know, that's the way we are. You know, we're sort of like this guy, you know, who just can't get it right. You know, this Papageno guy who's always sort of chasing off after birds. Well, along the way, I came to realize that there's also what we call in this program higher power, although I'd frankly rather call him the flying spaghetti monster, but I do have a great respect for that power. And I came to realize that it is his compulsive need to prove that is what I should honor. And that's why I'm trying to live my life now in the service of that. So what I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my own personal experience of this. I mean, I came into this program, well, let's talk actually before that. I mean, one of the things that I came to realize is that if I was trying to compulsively needing to prove, and frankly not doing a very good job of it. Because the thing is that if you're compulsively needing to prove, no matter what you have done, you still, you know, it's a compulsion. You can't stop. So you need to keep proving and proving and proving and proving and proving. Well, in the middle of that, what happened to me, you know, I'm sort of like Papageno, right? So I wanted a girlfriend. But I'd had some spiritual teaching and some spiritual experience, and I decided that I was going to pray for a girlfriend. And I made this sort of deal with God that, well, if I actually did produce a girlfriend, then I'd really believe in God. And I have this, I have a sponsee. Yes, folks, I've only completed this fourth step, but I do have a sponsee. And one of the things that we were working on is the second step. And I said, all right, I want you to come up with a miracle such that if this miracle happens, you will realize that there is a higher power. You will know it. And that was my miracle. And she's my wife. 25 years. Now, that happened long before this program happened, and what I should say is that what happened was that I should also explain that even though, you know, I was pretty clearly heterosexual, I hadn't had a serious relationship until I was 34. And so that's when I really felt like I needed to sort of do something. Anyway, so I did this prayer thing for 9 months, and I completely, and nothing was happening. Completely gave up. Now, I've actually studied the science of prayer, and there is a science of prayer. And the thing is that that was exactly the right thing to do, is to pray and then give up. Well, that's what I did. And a few months later, I had a clear intuition that of the relationships with women that I did have, there was a common thread, is that they were all sort of literary. I mean, I'm a New York intellectual, kind of an egghead. And, you know, if I was going to meet somebody and they were going to respect me for something, then that's what they would respect me for. And sure enough, there she was. I went to a book group, and I decided that I was going to meet a woman there. And there she was. So that to me is a wonderful recovery story, both in and of itself, but also because it sort of set me up for really understanding what recovery in UA is about, because it is a faith-based program. And most people have a lot of trouble with that. My wife briefly was a part of this program, and she says, well, I'm not a God person. And so she didn't feel like she could continue. Not that many people can. There are a lot of people who come and go. And I see why. It's because a lot of people don't want to do this God thing. Don't want to have that kind of spiritual experience and spiritual vision. I don't. I have a practical daily experience of a spirit of, the flying spaghetti monster. And at the same time, I feel a little bit embarrassed about it. I mean, it's really kind of funny because it's almost like, in my parents' generation, they were kind of embarrassed to talk about sex. Well, I was, doing this sort of bombing around the other night with Mike, and we turned on the radio, and, there was this lady on the radio being advised about how to have an orgasm. And, nobody seems to have a problem with that anymore. But everybody seems to have a problem talking about God, the G word. What is that? We're just as embarrassed about that as my parents were about talking about the S word or the F word or, all those words. But the thing is, they are just words. What matters is the spiritual experience. Well, the spiritual experience of that too. I mean, I like to say that the closest thing that most people have to experiencing God is in sex. And I think that that's kind of heretical, and that may be triggering for some people. So I'll just leave that. But what I'm trying to get at is that recovery is about recovering all of yourself, aligning everything. And that's why it is that so many of us have such trouble, specifically in the workplace, is because we can bring so little of ourselves to the workplace. Talking more about my specific experience in UA, what happened was that I was in the program for about 18 months, and I was frankly still unemployed, basically. I'm an older guy, and us older guys don't have an easy time getting a job. And I wasn't really doing too well in terms of getting a job. But I was convinced that this program that something was going to happen. Well, in the process of doing my fourth step, I really went deeply into my resentments. And I came to understand that a big part of the reason why I was an Underearners, I had these tremendous resentments against this wife who I was convinced was my soulmate, but there were all these other issues and all this stuff. Okay. Well, I let go of just enough of those resentments to actually get a job, And yeah, I really think I deserve a round of applause for that, It's a job that I don't particularly like. Sometimes I even hate. But it is a job. It pays the bills. I easily was able to afford to come here. And what I realized is that the spiritual path demands that we embrace the day-to-day, apparently mundane things and make them have spiritual meaning. That's the reason why it is that I'm in this program. That's what I'm trying to do. And that is my tremendous challenge. I mean, to some degree, I've been able to do that with my relationship with my wife. But now I see, and as part of this program, I see that I have the task of trying to make that happen with my job. It is true that regardless of the fact that I think it's bullshit, and I'll tell you what it is, I work for Bank of America. I am one of the people who's looking at the numbers in their risk database to see whether they're the calculations are indeed valid. And I've studied this stuff a great deal, enough to know that, frankly, it's all bullshit. That really, you know, I don't want to go into the politics of the whole thing, but that this is a very, very imprecise thing that is being given a veneer of precision by having it all on a computer. And yet, at the same time, I feel like there is a tremendous spiritual opportunity for me to go there, apply the study that I've made to this stuff. And, you know, I have a great deal of, you know, I look like a professor, and well, I really am. And, you know, just do the best work that I can. And I'm paid by the hour. So I put in 8 hours, no more, no less. But I try to be there all 8 hours. I take a break during the middle of the day to talk to my action partner, but guess what? That doesn't count. That's not part of the 8 hours. You know, and frankly, I am a little bit short, but, you know, I do the best I can. And, well, you know, I found out during this conference that I got an email saying that my contract was extended. And to me, that's a little bit of recovery, you know. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I'm really proud of that. Now, what I'm really interested in is the next step, because I feel like this can't be it. This can't be the end of the road. Okay, I have a job. I come to UA. I got a job. I've got a job that I hate. Is that the end of the story? I don't think so. So I'm going to see what happens with this exercise that Andrew proposed. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see whether I can come up with that one thing, with the understanding that the sky really is the limit. I mean, when I couldn't believe what happened here earlier this week. I just couldn't believe it. I was convinced this whole thing was going to be a train wreck, you know. And to honor that, you know, I wore the same bathing suit yesterday, and Mike and I were just going to say, oh, the hell with it, and go to the beach. That turned out, again, to be the right thing to do, because, all right, Mike is disavowing this, but I'm standing here saying it. This turned out to be the right thing to do because, again, we let go. Or, sorry, I let go. I don't know whether Mike did or not. He can talk about himself. Oh, that's one thing I wanted to say about, one final thing, I'm near the end, is that what I really like about this program is that, you know, there's this whole thing about having a guru. And I've come to understand that there is this tradition in India of having a guru. And a good guru will teach you how to connect to your own spirituality. But in this program, I really didn't need that. You know, what I really needed is to have the faith that I had something within me that could come out. So, you know, I'm looking around for a sponsor, and finally I wind up with this guy, and the more I find out about him, the more I find out that he's really the sort of fun-loving California guy at heart. And that's why it is that it was good that we went to the beach yesterday, Mike. Anyway, I think that I should take some questions now. I think I probably talked probably longer than I needed to. I'll take whatever questions people have right now for a few minutes. I do expect to be here today and tomorrow. Not that I necessarily have things to answer, but, you know, I have thought about these things, and maybe there's something to say. Thank you.
Could people please come up to the mic if they have a question? Thank you. Come up to the mic. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Justine. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you. What a wonderful talk. I really appreciated everything you said. It's awesome. The question I had is, at one point when you talked about the compulsive need to prove,
Yeah?
you started to say, I realized it was his compulsive need to prove. And I suddenly wanted to be like, wait a minute. Who are you referring to? Who's the his?
Oh, what we call in this program higher power.
Oh, so can you elaborate on that? Because I don't get that.
I think that's a really important point. I'm glad you asked, which is that, I don't well, let's put it this way. One of the things that I've come to realize about the whole thing with men and women is that as a man, I look at women, and so many of you, I find so many of you beautiful. But I've come to realize that women very often don't feel themselves that they're beautiful until some man tells them and gets them to think that. Well, that's the nature of higher power. Higher power needs to see its work in the world, its manifestation. It needs to see its beauty. And that's what I call the compulsive need to prove. But I don't really want to use the word compulsive anymore. Let's just say an opportunity to prove. Does that answer your question?
No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, what I'm trying to find out, though, is like in this program we have it as a symptom, compulsive need to prove, kind of, quote, symptom seems bad. But then if higher power is seeking to prove through us, is what you're saying.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
So you're taking it out of the context of a symptom in UA, and you're going over here and you're putting it into God is seeking to prove through us.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And what is the bridge, like in terms of like understanding with my under-earning, like how I can use that tool?
Well, your previous question was a good question. That is a great question. So, what is the bridge? Okay, my understanding is the bridge is being prepared, first of all, to let go of our compulsive, and here the key word is compulsive, because our need to prove, our self-importance is compulsive, is a symptom of non-God. The experience of God's proving looks and smells entirely different. So while we were hanging out on the beach yesterday, Mike and I were talking a lot about energy. And the thing is that we both knew, there was this thing, energy thing. The energy of compulsive need to prove and God's proof is entirely, amazingly, 100% different, 180 degrees different. God's proof is always a miracle. Always.
Always what?
A miracle, by definition.
Wow. That's really powerful.
Thank you.
So essentially, just to make sure I understand, it's like the small self need to prove, and then the higher self or higher power need to prove. And seeing those things distinctly is kind of like going from the symptom to the recovery.
Yes, I guess that's exactly right. 5 minutes.
Hi, Ben from Los Angeles.
Hi.
And I won't need a timer. I just, I understand that one of the objectives of this convocation was to sort of define what exactly is under-earning and the recovery from that. Did we get any closer to that?
Well, I thought I just did.
I mean,
I thought I just did. Look, I'm not going to be able to offer in 3 words what under-earning is. Although I actually did the other night, that it did say something I really liked, which is sustained prosperity. Now, I can't really go into that in great detail because there are other people who want, but talk to me afterwards if you want to.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I'm Susan from Los Angeles.
Hi, you're Susan.
And I'm Susan. And I find it interesting about this compulsive need to prove, because where I'm at in my under-earning is that I don't want to prove anything. I just want to be drunk in my time and enjoy myself however I want. And I have this small window of opportunity to really express myself and God's will for me.
Yeah.
So I don't understand that symptom. Can you give me an example of your...
Well, okay, that's the difference between New York and LA.
Okay.
I think I answered your question, right?
Do you need me to rephrase it?
Pardon?
Do you need me to rephrase my question?
No, I think I just answered your question.
You're talking about time and difference.
No, what I'm really talking about...
No, but what are you compulsively trying to prove?
Oh, you mean specifically
Yeah.
Ed, what am I trying to prove?
Yes.
Oh, well, one of the things that I'm trying to prove, among other things, is how spiritual I am. And another thing that I've been trying to prove is what a great leader of the GSB I was. And, you know, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I only have a few more minutes, so, but I'd be happy to give you a 20-page list.
One point. I think the people that I know that are compulsively needing to prove are usually earners. They're not under-earners because they're really...
Well, that's okay. Throughout a good part of my life, I was an earner, but I just got tired.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Could you speak more about your definition, sustained prosperity? Because many of these people weren't here, and I think it's brilliant. And when you went off the other day, it was just fantastic. I want to hear more of that.
Okay. The 30-second version gets to what I was saying a minute ago, is that for a long period of my life, I was an earner. But I was doing something that I hated, and I just said, screw this. And that's the nature of the disease, is that what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to sustain our prosperity. I mean, there are those of us who, you know, we go into a company and we've got to be promoted every year, and we've got to make $300,000 a year, and we've got to do this, you know. And you see this a lot with lawyers. And, you know, they work 90 hours a week. But the thing is, you can't sustain that throughout a life. You burn out one way or another. Either you start taking drugs, you become an alcoholic, or you become overweight, or you don't do any of those things and you have a heart attack at 45. Well, okay, that is, you know, and for a while, yeah, you're prosperous. But the thing is that it can't be sustained. The kind of thing that can be sustained is the kind of thing that, well, you know, on a daily basis, I've been able to do is I show up for work, I do what needs to be done, no more, no less. I give what I need to do, and, you know, it's part of a more balanced life. And that's what it is that I see this program is trying to do. And guess what? And as part of a vision, as part of a life. And that's what I see this program is trying to do. And I think I answered your question.
Thank you, Ed. That's time.
And thank you. Okay, good. Thanks. I'll be around if you want to ask me any more questions. Bye-bye.
Those shorts.
Thanks, Ed. That was great. All right, so I'm going to be the next speaker. I'm going to talk for 45 minutes, and I'd like to entertain questions, so I don't want to talk the whole time. And I want to keep the focus on recovery, on the arc of recovery. And I'm going to kind of focus on financial recovery without talking about specific numbers, but talk about how I've been able, to what extent I've been able to be self-supporting or not at different times in my recovery and what that's looked like. Say it again? Oh, sure. Yeah. You got it. Closer, like that? Okay.
Just a quick announcement. While the speakers are speaking, it would be really helpful